All right, ready? All right, let's call to order the Monday, August 19th, 2019 Board of Aldermen regular meeting. Would everyone please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? Roll call, please, Shelley.
Mayor Dimmitt,
Here.
Alderman Kramer,
Present.
Alderman Leahy, Alderman Lockmiller,
Here.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Here.
Alderwoman Tice,
Here.
Alderman Plufka,
Here.
Alderwoman Sims, and Alderman Weggie.
Yes, here. Thank you. Next on the item, or on the agenda, is item 3A, approval or amendment of the agenda. Any changes? Any objection to approving the agenda by acclamation?
Did we want
Yes.
to take things off the consent agenda?
We can take that when we come to the consent. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm sorry?
Public hearing. Want to move it around now or the?
Okay. Thank you, Bola. I would like a motion from the board on the public hearing down at item 5. We've got 5A, B, and C. I would like to move those around at the request of the applicant to be 5A, 5C, then 5B. Can I get a motion to make that change?
So moved.
Okay, we got a motion by Alderman Weggie and a second by Alderwoman Sims. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, with that, any objection to approving the agenda by acclamation as amended? It will be approved. Next on the agenda, item 4, announcements, appointments, proclamations, and recognitions. The first one is a proclamation for Lieutenant Elmer Phelps, who has retired. Chief Speece.
Thank you, Mayor, Board of Aldermen. We'd like to take a few minutes and recognize Elmer's over 40 years in law enforcement this evening. Elmer, could you stand up and come forward, please? We have a proclamation. Bola, I believe you're going to read it. Is it accurate? Or someone is? Mayor?
Certainly.
Yes,
I
sir.
will be more than happy to. Proclamation for Lieutenant Elmer Phelps. Whereas the men and women who devote their time and energy as professional law enforcement officers have assumed responsibilities essential for the safety of their fellow citizens, and whereas for nearly 40 years, Lieutenant Elmer Phelps has dedicated himself to the highest standards of professionalism and dedication to the community and law enforcement agencies, including the City of Berkeley, St. Charles County Sheriff's Department, and the Brentwood Police Department. And whereas Elmer's career with the Brentwood Police Department began on February 1st, 1990, where he took the oath of patrol officer until his promotions to corporal in 1996, sergeant in 2000, and lieutenant in 2005. And whereas because of the many important contributions that Lieutenant Elmer Phelps has made while serving nearly 30 years to the great city of Brentwood, Missouri, he is deserving of special recognition. And whereas, in recognition of his nearly 40 years of honorable service, the City of Brentwood family, friends, and residents celebrated his career and retirement on July 31st. And whereas on behalf of the entire Brentwood community and the City of Brentwood Police Department congratulates Lieutenant Elmer Phelps on an outstanding career and wish him and his family all the best as he begins the next chapter of his life. Now therefore, I, David A. Dimmitt, Mayor of the City of Brentwood, Missouri, do hereby congratulate and recognize Lieutenant Elmer Phelps for his exceptional service, distinguished career, and commitment to public safety and protection and service to the residents, families, and businesses of the City of Warmth, Brentwood, Missouri, as a member of the Brentwood Police Department, presented this 19th day of August, 2019.
Quick gift to present the Elmer Ball, Major McIntyre. Last, we'd like to present Elmer with his retirement badge and his credentials.
Treat people the way you want to be treated. Thank you. My dad always taught me to treat others the way I want to be treated. And I have an overwhelming love for people, which is why I got in this profession. My friends at the police department, the fire department, all the city services, Mr. Mayor, everybody in the city of Brentwood has always treated me very nicely. I've tried to treat everyone I come in contact with respect and honor and put them ahead of myself. I would take time to talk to my coworkers, ask them how their wives and children were. When we'd arrest children, I'd ask them, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? That insight that I was taught, I think is one of the reasons why I've had a successful career. And these officers, I've noticed over the years, are doing the same thing because we're stewards of the community. And a lot of people sometimes think police officers don't care about people. But we come to work every day. We give of ourselves, our families wait for us at home, hoping that we come back safely. And I think we're an integral part of society. Nobody wants to be told what to do. But it's important that we take the time to get to know the people that we serve. Maybe society wouldn't be so bad if we took a little more time to inquire why people do certain things. It shows compassion, it shows respect, and it shows honor. And that's what I was taught. So that's what I've tried to put my best foot forward for the city of Brentwood and St. Charles County, Berkeley, and my life. I always try to put people ahead of myself. And we have a lot of selfless people here who will do that. I have seen them do that. Our younger officers, our more experienced veteran officers, everybody shows compassion. This has been a great place to work. And I'm very happy and honored that I had the opportunity to work for the city of Brentwood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, item 4B, Brentwood Citizen Award of Excellence to Kim McClarty.
Lieutenant Phelps, very well said. Mr. Mayor, members of the board, thank you for allowing us time to present these Citizens Awards of Excellence. The first one will be for Kim McClarty. I'd like to read you a little synopsis of what she did. On or about July 17th, 2019, Ms. McClarty was operating her vehicle under the Uber banner and picked up a fare with a destination of the Brentwood Target store. The passenger was a young foreign female college student who Ms. McClarty could immediately tell was suffering from some stressful condition. After gaining her confidence, it was learned that this female student was contacted by a supposed law enforcement agency and advised she was subject to arrest and needed to provide several $1,000s in Target gift cards to provide her security from being arrested. The female student began crying incessantly and was worrisome for her safety. Ms. McClarty immediately deviated from Target and brought the student to the Brentwood Police Department for assistance. The young student was assured that this was an act of financial exploitation, a scam, intended to cost her thousands of dollars. The members of the Brentwood Police Department advised the student she was in no harm, nor should she fear incarceration if she did not complete the task. Ms. McClarty, who is a Brentwood resident, should be recognized for her courageous act to not only recognize a possible crime was in progress, but had the forethought to bring the victim to the Brentwood Police Department for their assistance in helping to calm the victim and reassure her safety in this attempted act. Ms. McClarty's decision circumvented a scam by those who prey upon victims using fear and coercion as their vehicle to perpetrate these crimes. This display of professionalism and courageous action personifies your character, and I am proud to present you with this Citizens Award of Excellence.
Next on the agenda, Brentwood Citizen Award of Excellence to Mary Hartnett.
On July 2nd, 2019, a runaway autistic child came to the door of Miss Mary Hartnett and immediately ran away from the door. Miss Hartnett recognized the child from work as an educator at Mark Twain School. Mrs. Hartnett grabbed her keys and told her husband to follow her as they got in their vehicle and dialed 911. When Miss Hartnett was about a half block from Brentwood Boulevard, she jumped out of her car, putting herself between the runaway child and Brentwood Boulevard to protect the child from running into the busy street. Mrs. Hartnett, using her educational training, sat down on the road and used the same hand signals they utilize at school to communicate with this child. These actions made the child feel at ease and caused the child to respond to her so she could safely secure the child from traffic. The officers arrived and, having prior experience with the child, assisted in getting the autistic child reunited with her parents. Mrs. Hartnett's quick action and experience in handling children with special needs was instrumental in averting a tragedy. For her actions, Mrs. Hartnett is being awarded the Citizens Award of Excellence for her participation in making Brentwood a safer place. This display of professionalism and courageous action personifies your character, and I'm proud to present you with this Citizens Award of Excellence.
Item 4C, 4D, Police Department recognition of Sergeant Matt Morgan promotion.
Thank you, sir. Corporal Matt Morgan, will you come forward to be made sergeant, please? Matt's wife is on a cruise this evening, and I believe his young son, where's he? He's going to present Matt with his sergeant's badge. Don't stick daddy.
Son's kind of behind the podium. There you go. There you go.
Ben Drexel, you want to come forward? Josh, come on. Josh Bauer, Sox, police officer to corporal. Ben Drexel, police officer to corporal. Gentlemen, and your wives close? Thank you. This is Nikki and Megan. Come on up, please. They're going to pin the badges on their husbands.
All right, item 5, public hearings. We have 3 of them. The first is case number 19-08, a public hearing to consider amendment of a conditional use permit and site plan review to amend the CUP for a hotel for property zone UD Urban Development District and located at 1695 South Hanley. With that, I will gavel open public hearing for case number 19-08. Scott Riley, would you care to come on down?
How is everybody tonight? Mayor, members of the Board of Aldermen, thank you for having us here tonight. For purposes of the first hearing on the conditional use permit, we believe the best course of action was to have Kevin Chapman from Equus here to talk about the site plan. Kevin was really the individual from the company that made the presentations at the Planning Zoning Committee, and he's very intimately familiar with the plan. So I'm going to be available to answer questions as they come up, and I'll obviously be involved in later hearings. For purposes of this CUP hearing, we ask that Kevin speak to the Board of Aldermen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. My role, as Scott said, at the company is to oversee design and construction of all of our hotels. And I wanted to just give you a very brief overview of what we're doing. We are, of course, building a new Town Place Suites Hotel by Marriott. It's a 7-story building, approximately 76,000 square feet, gross square feet of space, 128 guest rooms. The hotel will include an indoor swimming pool and a fitness center, and of course, the requisite dining area for the free breakfast that hotels offer. Town Place brand is an extended stay hotel, which appeals to the business traveler. It's a place where you can stay for several days, a week, comfortably. The site itself, about 1.4 acres, and the site plan that has been approved by Planning and Zoning, which is in front of you now, actually improves site coverage from what is existing, from 95% to 89% total site coverage. Open area on the site is increased from about 4.5% to nearly 11%. So there's more green space, more landscaping. The Hanley Road entrance to the project is being widened and improved to include a designated right turn lane and a left turn lane. This is being done in connection with St. Louis County. They have already approved this, our plan to improve it. And just last week, the Planning and Zoning Commission considered and approved our comprehensive site plan. So we've been through the process, and that's the site plan and CUP you have in front of you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Lisa, do you have anything during the public hearing?
Just to add to what the applicant had said, I wanted to also talk about, or not talk about, but just let you know about two other design issues. He mentioned the maximum site coverage. So the site coverage will actually decrease from what's there now. The property is zoned urban development, so the maximum site coverage is 80%, but there is an allowance in the UD requirements to go ahead and give a 10% bonus up to 90%. And so the maximum site coverage for the proposed development is 88.1%, but that is indicated as a condition of approval for the CUP. And the development was also approved with having 101 parking spaces. There's actually 103 that are on the site plan, so it should be sufficient. But the condition states that at least a minimum of 101 parking spaces has to be provided in accordance again with our parking restriction requirements of the code. And then the last thing is that the condition of approval was also a relaxation on the buffer that's required, the 5-foot buffer requirement on the west rear property lines as well as the east or the front property lines. And Kevin did mention that the comprehensive sign plan was submitted and approved last week from the Planning and Zoning Commission, so that will also come before you at the September 3rd meeting. And otherwise, the landscape plan, photometrics plan was all part of this project and was included in your bill that you're going to consider tonight. I think that's all I have.
Thank you. And members of the board, both Lee Cannon and Andy Frankie are in attendance and will be available to answer your questions during the first reading later on in the meeting. Anybody else in the public care to address the board on this case number 19-08? Seeing none, we will continue the public hearing until September 3rd, 2019. Next on the agenda is public hearing for item 5C, and that's a public hearing pursuant to Chapter 353 of the Revised Statutes of Missouri and Ordinance Number 4302 of the city to consider the approval of the proposed EQH Brentwood Redevelopment Area Development Plan, open parens, the development plan, close parens. And with that, we'll open a public hearing for this matter. We have, I think, Mark Grimm. Nope, yes? I've seen shaking the head no on that.
Scott, could you kind of tee this off?
Again, Mayor, members of the board, my name is Scott Riley from Cook & Riley. We're representing Equus in this matter. Really quick to open the hearing to make sure that we're just following the correct procedure. The information that Kevin Chapman conveyed on the site plan, we'd like to ask that the board take notice of that information so it's incorporated into the record of this hearing. We just didn't want to go back through a recitation of what the project details are and jump right into the Chapter 353 portion of the hearing. So just for everybody's education, Chapter 353 is really a tool that's been made available to cities and developers in Missouri. It's one of the oldest economic development tools in the state. I believe it had its foundations in the 1950s. Typically, developers and make applications under Chapter 353 to ask for assistance for development projects in the form of tax abatement, and that's really why we're here tonight. Our specific ask under Chapter 353 is for a real property tax abatement associated with this development at a level of 50% for the first 10 years after completion, an additional 25% in years 11 through 15. In order to make that ask, the state statute requires us to follow certain procedures, and we believe we've followed them in this instance. Specifically, we have to submit a development plan to the city for their review, and associated with that development plan, there's some necessary attachments, one called the blighting analysis and one called the tax impact statement. So on June 19th, 2019, on behalf of the developer and their redevelopment corporation under Chapter 353, which is the EQH Brentwood Redevelopment Corporation. We submitted that development plan, blighting analysis, and tax impact statement to the city for everyone's review. After the initial review by the outside advisors that helped the city, I believe Gilmore and Bell, PJV, and city staff, the next step was for that development plan to go to a public hearing being held by Brentwood's own redevelopment corporation. That hearing was held on June 26, 2019. And from that hearing, I believe there was a recommendation made that the city find blight and authorized the use of Chapter 350 to grant the tax abatement pending the results of this public hearing and further negotiations between the developer and the city. I know Andy Struckoff from PJV is here. I saw him in the crowd. He was going to speak later on a little bit to the blighting study. PJV did perform that on behalf of the city. I wanted to make a few comments on that if I could, just so we could avoid any undue or any unnecessary confusion. The blighting test under Chapter 353 is very specific. It's statutory. In simple terms, it requires that you look at 4 factors. You look at the age of the property, the obsolescence of the property, kind of the inadequate or outmoded design of the property, and the physical deterioration of the property. If those 4 factors are found, you say, do those factors contribute to the property being an economic liability and a social liability for the city, as defined by Chapter 353 and relevant case law. In PJV's report, which I know Andy's going to talk about further, they found all those 4 factors, and they specifically found that the property was an economic liability and a social liability under the applicable standards. The other piece I do want to touch on, the tax impact statement. That required us to kind of evaluate or estimate the impact not only on Brentwood, but all the other taxing jurisdictions that would get a property tax, and the effect of the abatement request on their revenues. So we did that analysis, and obviously, pursuant to the statute, gave notification to all the taxing districts, including the school district. Again, our ask was 50% for years 1 through 10, 25% for years 11 through 15. In the tax impact analysis, which again, PJV prepared and was reviewed by us and Gilmore and Bell, they did a no-build study, meaning if nothing happened on this parcel, what was the tax generating capability? I think the estimate was around $39,000 a year in property taxes if nothing happens. To compare that, if our abatement request was granted, the project moves forward, it's fully completed, the estimate in years 1 through 10 is that there'd be approximately $125,000 in property taxes being paid in for those years 1 through 10. In years 11 through 15, that would jump up to around $215,000 in taxes. And obviously, there's no abatement in year 16 going forward, so it would be fully on the tax rolls. And the estimate at that point would be it'd be generating $300,000 plus. In looking at the impact, I know everybody's always concerned about the impact on the school district because that's the biggest taxing jurisdiction that benefits from property taxes. In year 1, if this project was approved and fully built, we estimated in year 1 that the Brentwood School District would receive an extra $62,000+ in property taxes, and that's with no impact on their resources, right? A hotel is not generating any more demand or utilization of the school district. It's extra revenue for their coffers. So we thought that was significant and wanted to highlight that. As we went through this process, it's easy for us to make the ask, but we wanted to convey to you how can that be measured? How do you know that's reasonable? We kind of looked at 2 things. We looked at kind of uniqueness of this site. It's very strange. It has no frontage on a Hanley Road. It's irregularly shaped. It's surrounded by the Metrolink track on the west side, detention pond for Home Depot on the north side, some other commercial properties on the south side. I think it's the Animal Protective Association building. So there are some real challenges with that site. There's clay mines potentially underneath. The odd shape demanded a redesign of the hotel from the typical 5-floor kind of plan and floor plate to a 7-story tower. All that adds construction expense, adds foundation expense, and those types of things. So at the request of the city, we went back and tried to quantify the extraordinary costs that Equus would bear to put this hotel development on that unique site. And their calculation showed around $2.5 million of extraordinary costs. And I know Andy's going to speak to those a little bit later. When we compared that to our incentive ask or our tax abatement ask, on a gross value over 15 years, it was calculated that the abatement's worth about 1.6 million in total. One of the things we thought is relevant is to kind of attach a net present value to that, because we're bearing that upfront 2.5 million on day one. When we put a reasonable commercial discount rate and applied that in a net present value calculation, we got to around $1 million of net present value of that $1.6 million abatement. So under our kind of criteria, we thought that the extraordinary costs do outweigh or exceed the value of the abatement, especially on a net present value calculation. The second way we measured it is just, all economic development, all projects, they're done to create return for developers, right? You're doing something for the community, but there's also a return element to the developer. When Equus was trying to get this project financed, they obviously utilized all their contacts in the nationwide network of equity investors in hotel projects. And what they found was, to make this work, our incentive ask had to be the 50% for the first 10 years, 25% for years 11 through 15. As of right now, we have an equity investor that's committed to the project as long as it gets to a certain projected rate of return. And to meet that rate of return, we have to have the level of incentive that we requested. And I do want to highlight that our request is not the maximum allowed under the law. Chapter 353 allows 100% abatement for years 1 through 10 and 50% for 11 through 25. So we tried to scale our request to just always be what we needed to get this project financed. So with that, I think that would be my initial commentary. Obviously, I know Andy's speaking. If anybody has any questions, I'll be available to answer. We can also bring up some of the Equus representatives as needed. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Andy?
Yeah.
And we'll see. Gonna repeat this. Have to wait for this. As soon as that. Yeah. Positive change you're bringing.
Like that? Yeah. You bet.
Yes, turn
Or maybe you
solid.
could do his flash drive. Let's take this off, let's get that ready.
Okay, all ready to go?
All ready to go. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I appreciate it. As Scott Riley mentioned earlier, I'm going to talk about the blight study a little bit, which we conducted for the area. And as he mentioned, the area does qualify, in our opinion, as a blighted area, as it meets all the factors required under the Chapter 353 statute. Let's kind of go through those briefly for the purposes of this public hearing. The first qualifying factor is age. The Act asks us to look at a property and determine whether it is more than 35 years of age. And in this case, the building is 40 years of age, so older than 35. It's also obsolete and suffers from inadequate or outmoded design. That's one factor. The next issue is obsolescence. The common definition of obsolescence is the process of becoming obsolete or outdated. This typically closely relates to outdated design, inadequate design. And by virtue of those factors, this building is obsolete. And it's further reinforced by the fact that the property owners determined that the cost of renovations needed to correct this obsolescence and inadequate and outmoded design equals or exceeds the cost of new construction. Another key factor of obsolescence is the relationship between the values of improvements and the land values. For the past 10 years, the value of the land of this property has been higher than the value of the improvements, which is an indication that the improvements themselves are obsolete. In the further evidence of outmoded design, in the 40 years since this building was first constructed, there have been advances in building materials that make most of the building obsolete. The design of the building is not adequate for its originally intended use. It's light manufacturing and office. Also, the building lacks frontage on South Hanley Road. Despite its address, it is not physically on South Hanley. It requires access via an easement from the neighboring property. In that instance, it is a landlocked parcel. So not only is it functionally obsolete, but it also suffers from obsolete access issues. The building also suffers from physical deterioration. Our team observed water infiltrating the roof of the building, water infiltrating windows, deteriorated building materials inside and outside of the building. There are significant issues.
Andy, if I can just interrupt you just for a second here. Just what is PGAV's role in this application?
Our role in this application is to present our analysis of the blight finding, present the tax impact statement, and also to present our review of the developer's request for tax abatement.
But are you representing the applicant, are you representing the city, or none of the above?
The city.
Okay, thank you. That's just for the benefit of the people watching.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Another factor, economic liability. Does the property constitute an economic liability in its present condition and use? And in light of the property's low assessed value and the fact that its assessed value has not kept pace with increases in assessed value in the city, in our opinion, it is an economic liability. Is the property also a social liability? You know, in our review of the property, in our touring of it, we found instances of vandalism, trespass, evidence of criminal activity on the site, encampments, look like people have been camping on the site. So the property's vacancy, and the fact that it's unsecured and unmonitored can create conditions that are conducive to crime right now. So in our opinion, the area qualifies as a blighted area due to the fact that it suffers from age, obsolescence, inadequate and outmoded design, and physical deterioration. And by reason of these conditions, the area has become an economic liability and a social liability, and is conducive to ill health, transmission of disease, crime, and the inability to pay reasonable taxes. Any questions on the blight analysis before I move on? Okay. Moving on to the tax abatement. The developers, as Scott rightly indicated, has requested 10 years of 50% abatement of improvements, followed by 5 years of 25% abatement on the property's total value. As he also mentioned, we did produce a fiscal impact analysis describing the fiscal impact to all affected taxing jurisdictions of the tax abatement proposal. I'll go through that briefly here. And the numbers I'm going to go through here, these are average annual values for the periods shown. I just thought this would be the easiest way to kind of talk through it and kind of talk through the numbers. So altogether, for all jurisdictions, property taxes paid years 1 through 10, approximately $130,000 annually. Property taxes abated, roughly about the same number for the first 10 years. And property taxes paid years 11 through 15, $218,000. Property taxes abated years 11 through 15, approximately $73,000. Now let's break that down for the city of Brentwood. Fiscal impact to the city, property taxes paid the first years 1 through 10 to 50% abatement, approximately $12,000 per year. Taxes abated about roughly the same. For the next period, years 11 through 15, property taxes paid approximately $20,000 annually. Taxes abated approximately $6,500 annually. For the school district, taxes paid the first 10 years, approximately $66,000 a year. Taxes abated about the same amount. And then in the second period, years 11 through 15, a 25% abatement, taxes paid approximately $111,000 per year, and taxes abated approximately $37,000 per year. So the fiscal impact is a positive picture. And then the city asked us to review the developer's representation of extraordinary costs and the request for tax abatement. So we had some conversations with the developer and his team, went through a breakdown of their extraordinary costs to get an understanding of them, and also how the tax abatement fits in with their financial situation for the project. This table up here in the monitors right now shows the total cost for the project and then the extraordinary portion, that portion for which this developer is seeking tax abatement. Total cost of the project is $25.2 million, and the extraordinary portion of those costs is approximately 10%, $2.5 million. You can see some of those costs are in appraisal, environmental, legal costs, additional boring, is environmental work, interest financing, bank fees, building demolition, so you have to tear the existing building down, construction, building, and site improvements, architecture and engineering, and signage. So I'm going to go through some of these briefly. Some of the legal costs are associated with having to go through this 353 action and other things associated with the time the developers own the property. Boring costs, those are environmental costs associated with them having to understand where pollutants on the site are. Evidently, there's a significant amount of slag under the surface that they have to be careful how they interact with as they're building, so they need to know where it is. So that's the reason for that cost, which is understandable. Building demolition is also an understandable cost, so you have to tear down the building. I'm just going to go down to this next slide here. In our review, the extraordinary costs really arise from two factors, the passage of time and site difficulty. So we look at these costs. The costs associated with time amount to roughly $1.1 million, and that is in the construction and building of site improvements line item. A total of $16.1 million, extraordinary portion $1.8 million. Approximately half of that extraordinary portion is inflation associated with construction materials and labor since the developer bought the property first in 2017. The other half of that figure is having to do with modifications to the building and managing the site so they could construct an economically feasible hotel on the site, which we think is understandable. So there are approximately $1.4 million in costs associated with site difficulty, things that they have to overcome to have an economically feasible project on the site. Some are associated with time. The total is $2.5 million in costs. But how does this request compare with the value of tax abatement? As Scott mentioned earlier, the lump sum value of the abatement is roughly $1.6 million for over 15 years. Over a 10-year period, the value of tax abatement is approximately $1.3 million. If you did net present value at 15 years, as you mentioned, the value is roughly $1 million. I got $1,050,000. And the net present value of 10 years of tax abatement is approximately $900,000. By every measure, we're at a number that's less than the extraordinary costs they're representing and seeking relief for. So what really is the value of the tax abatement? It's really the economic value to the project and how it impacts their bottom line, their rate of return. And so we did our analysis of their project. They provided some numbers. We kind of worked up our own pro forma and estimated that without tax abatement, their internal rate of return for this project would be roughly 12.3%. But with tax abatement, their internal rate of return would be at 15.5%. And that's with 10 years of a tax abatement rather than 15 years of tax abatement. Understanding the value of the tax abatement for a project like this is we're kind of looking at things in two different ways. So we're looking at, one, the economic value of taxes that the developer doesn't have to pay to them and their bottom line, but we're also considering the value of taxes abated or deferred by taxing districts. So on the one hand, I'd like to think of the taxes as a lump sum because these are annual taxes being abated on the part of taxing districts. On the other hand, and it's right and reasonable to think about from the developer's perspective, what's the lump sum value, the economic value in the present day of this tax abatement. In both cases, what they're asking for is less than their extraordinary costs. It's not terribly unreasonable. But in our opinion, their project gets to a sustainable level from a return perspective after 10 years, the 10 years of tax abatement. Now, what's tax abatement? And there also is the community improvement district they're asking for as well, which layers on some other financial mechanisms of this project. So in this slide, we see they're asking for 353 tax abatement, a sales tax of up to 1%, and then a special assessment up to $5 per occupied room. And those two things paired together by the CID are very similar to the deal associated with the new Marriott in Richmond Heights at Dale and Hanley. Virtually exactly the same. So how do we value these parts of the financial situation? If they were to decide to impose the $5 per occupied room special assessment through the CID, we estimate net present value using a 7% discount rate that the value of that revenue stream is $1.5 million, as using the fundamentals of this project. Coincidentally, that's almost exactly the same as the bond proceeds from the Crossings Richmond Heights project about 6 months ago when they went to market with their special assessment revenues. Now, if you add the 1% sales tax, that revenue stream as well, that adds about $500,000 to that number. You're about $2 million in proceeds if you were to bond that revenue stream out. Now, these are our estimates. I don't know if they intend to do that or not, but if they were, this is the kind of revenue that they could achieve. And you add to those numbers the value of the tax abatement. 15 years of Chapter 353 tax abatement, rolling everything together into one, the value is 2.8 million. At 10 years of tax abatement, rolling everything into one, the value is about 2.7 million. So the difference of the developer at 15 years of tax abatement, 10 years of tax abatement, and a net present value basis is roughly $100,000. Any questions right now?
We entertain, go
Want to
ahead.
wait until
Yeah,
the first
let's-
reading? Roger.
Let's wait
That was my
until we
question.
do the first reading. Thank you, Alderman. Okay. Anything else, Andy?
That's all.
Okay. Lisa, do you care to come up and say anything? Oh, great. Anybody in the public care to speak to item 5C, the public hearing pursuant to Chapter 353? All right, with that, we will close the public hearing for 5C. And next on the agenda is item 5B, our last public hearing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And that's a public hearing pursuant to Community Improvement District Act, Section 67.1401 through 67.1571 of the revised statutes of Missouri. I will gavel open the public hearing for item 5B. And speaking on that, we got Scott back up here, Scott Riley coming back up. This is on the Community Improvement District.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you again, Mayor. Thank you, members of the board. At the outset of this hearing, just like the last one, I'd like to request that the record made for the CUP hearing and the hearing on the 353 be incorporated by reference into the CAD hearing as well. As Andy mentioned, in addition to the 353 application, the developer did file a CID formation petition with the city on June 19th, 2019. The proposed name of that district was the South Hanley Road Community Improvement District. It was only going to encompass the project site. So there was no adjacent properties that were going to be part of the CID. The CID would only contain the hotel development. The proposed initial board of directors for this particular CID were all representatives of the property owner, so they were all affiliated with Equus. It was Greg Mullenix, Connor Pandel, Jeffrey Nielsen, Kevin Chapman, and Barbara Powers. In the petition, we reserved or we're granting the CID the power to impose two revenue sources. One, a CID sales tax, which is just an incremental sales tax imposed on taxable sales made within the district. That revenue stream doesn't try to cannibalize or divide any existing revenue stream from sales tax that the city gets. It just adds a percentage or a portion of a percentage to the overall rate that would be applicable at the hotel site. In the petition, we said that could go up to 1% additional taxes under the CID Act. We could put it in any increment of an eighth of a percent up to 1%. The other revenue source that we granted the power for the CID to impose was a special assessment. The measurement of the assessment was going to be based on occupied sleeping rooms per night. So it would be an additional point of sale charge to hotel patrons when they reserved a room at night. The petition did set forth the maximum rate would be $5 a occupied room night. Again, that could be imposed at any increment up to that level. To speak more to those revenue sources, we've worked with the developer on a lot of hotel projects over the last few years. I can promise you that the sales tax revenue source is one that they're counting on. That isn't necessarily being driven by just the developer wanting to collect more sales tax at the point of sale, as they've gone out to the marketplace for debt financing, not necessarily equity financing in this case, but debt financing. Many of the lenders expect to see and ask to see that these special taxing district revenues are created and that exist, because they want to try to attach to those as additional collateral for the loans. That's been consistent with the practice in Equus of its last few deals in the St. Louis area, and as Andy indicated, I think that's very common of probably every hotel project that's been put in place in St. Louis City and St. Louis County over the last 8 to 10 years. As of today, I tell you, we have done no analysis at all on the special assessment. We've reserved the power of the CID to impose that special assessment. So the projections that PJV gave on the impact of the special assessment, I can't tell you whether that's true or not true, because I don't know that there's a plan right now to utilize the power to impose the special assessment actually in practice. But I do promise you that the sales tax will be put in place. Our estimate of the CID sales tax, based on kind of the ramp up of the economic activity at the hotel, would be around $25,000 to $35,000 a year in years 1 through 3. The math's pretty easy. It's 1% of taxable sales, and we're expecting taxable sales at that hotel around 2.8 million in year 1, growing a little bit in years 2 and 3, and hopefully a little forward till it caps out. I will say that the sales numbers at that hotel will be greater than that taxable sale number, but some of the users are anticipated to be government travelers, and obviously their hotel room nights are exempt. We are not seeking any sort of authorization for the CID to impose a property tax. The last remark I'll have is more directly related to just the city and the benefit the city could see from this activity. Again, to the extent that you're creating a development that generates taxable retail sales, obviously the city's fully loaded sales tax rate is now about 3%. We know some of that's shared with the county pursuant to some pooling of certain elements of the city's taxes. But at the levels of economic activity that we're anticipating, or the levels of taxable sales we're anticipating at the hotel, our thought is that the city, again, even at 3% on 3 million, that's $90,000 a year, right? So there is significant sales tax creation for the city as well for this hotel, and we just wanted you to evaluate that in light of some of the evaluations that are being done for the reasonableness of the CID. If anybody has any questions, I'll take them. Otherwise, we'll turn it over to the next speaker. Thank you for your time.
Let's move along. I've got down Mark Grims. Mark, you're addressing on this? You're nothing? Okay, so you wait till the first read. Okay. Anybody else in the public care to address the board on item 5B under the public hearing? This is under the creation of the Community Improvement District. Seeing none, we will close public hearing on item 5B. Move on now to item 6, citizen comments. Anybody in the public or in the audience care to address the board? Now is the time to do so. Having none, we will move on. Item 7, mayor and alderman reports. First up is the mayor. I have just 4 really quick things, just an update. Last Monday, I met with Councilwoman Lisa Clancy and County Executive Sam Page at the request or the invitation of Lisa Clancy, Councilwoman Clancy, along with 10 other mayors from the 16 municipalities that make up the 5th district, of which she is the council person. The purpose of that was to hear from each municipality on what they believe that the county could do to help them out. And I expressed to her, along with the mayor from Ladue, the need to look at traffic on McKnight, specifically Tildes Park during Winter Wonderland. And there's a settlement agreement which calls out for the St. Louis County to be providing 2 police officers during that Winter Wonderland, which they are not doing. And so we asked them to look into that, as well as to the extent that we have to provide officers, and Ladue does, that they either provide them in lieu thereof or to reimburse us for that cost. Second item is I made a presentation to the GRG on Tuesday. Craig actually might discuss this. I don't know if you're going to or not. No, in front of the Board of Aldermen, or they're in front of their board to make a request for a grant from the GRG in the amount of $3 million to help fund Brentwood Bound project, and we will hear from that board hopefully by the end of the year. Third is, you all saw, or most of you saw, that the First Watch was a victim yesterday or Saturday. I don't know if they're wanting to put in some air conditioning, but a car ran through two big storefront windows. When I got the email from our city administrator, I drove down there, and thankfully, the two owners were actually still on site, and they are not going to be deterred. And they said they will still plan on opening on August the 26th. We have, I want to thank Eric and his crew at Parks and Recreation for, in general, for the Music on the Menu series that he did this summer as well as last Friday. It was a great event. A lot of us were there. The choice of the band was terrific. I've been hearing nothing but rave reviews from a lot of citizens that were able to attend. And finally, a month from now or thereabouts is the annual Brentwood Days Parade. And I would encourage you to participate in this parade. I spoke with the director of the music for the Brentwood School District today, and they have not participated in the last few years, but they will participate this year. And I believe Alderman Plufka has been working overtime as well to see if he could land a float in the parade as well. So I just want to shout out to you. If you have any connections, if you know of anybody, if you can encourage someone to join the parade, that would be wonderful. And that's all I have. Next on the agenda, Alderman Kramer.
No report at this time, Your Honor.
Alderman Lockmuller.
The next Brentwood Century Foundation event is on Brentwood Days, the day of the parade. It's a 5K race, a 1 mile walk, and you can go to the Brentwood100.org, and they'll link you up to get you signed up for the run. And Ward 3 will meet next Tuesday, August 27th, 7 o'clock, over at the Rec Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes, as library liaison, the best attended adult program ever was last Friday night. They did not coordinate with Eric, so that Audio August here had a huge turnout, and next year they will try to coordinate so that there is not music and a library function for adults on the same night. There's a new employee, Joni Hayes, has been hired to do adult programming. She comes to us from St. Louis Community College at Forest Park Library, and she helped Friday night with the big turnout, so it looks promising.
Thank you. Alderman Plufka.
I want to thank our mayor for giving me the great expectation for providing this float for Brentwood Days. I am going to do what I can to provide that float. Other than that, I have no report.
Okay. I know you can come through.
Right, thank you.
Alderwoman Sims.
No report.
Alderwoman Parker-Tice.
No report.
And Alderman Weggie. Okay, let's move on. Item 8, City Administrator's Report. A, Brentwood Bound Update. Is Craig handling that?
Good evening. Craig Schlitter with Navigate Building Solutions. I'll be providing the Brentwood Bound update for tonight. The only costs that were spent this month were soft costs. Those costs include the Deer Creek flood mitigation, design and engineering, Manchester Road improvements, design and engineering, project management fees, property appraisals, financial reviews, and environmental studies. Total spent to date is $3,719,859.99.
Any questions? Yes, Alderman Plufka.
Thanks. The mayor alluded to a presentation with the GRG. Is that the same amount of money that was already, to some extent, not promised, but in a memorandum of understanding earlier this year?
Correct. It was $3 million, and the staff at Great Ridge Greenway prefaced his presentation saying, hey, the ask is $3 million, and at the end of the presentation, they asked the mayor what his request was, and he confirmed the $3 million ask. So it's very clear. It is a $3 million ask. The next step is going to be some partnership documents if their board approves it, and then they'll incorporate those funds into their budget to allow them to come to Brentwood in 2021 and 2022, assuming their board approves it.
In your budgeting, has the participation of the GRG been taken into account? No.
No.
So that would affect, assuming it comes through, that would affect your budgeting going forward?
Correct. The $79.6 million is a combination of the 2018 and 2019 comps.
Sure.
So if the Great Ridge Greenway funds come through, along with MoDOT cost share and East-West Gateway grants, all that's above and beyond that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Craig? Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, item 8B, authorization of notice to proceed for Phase 2 Brentwood-bound contracts with consultants, Navigate Building Solutions, and CH2M Hill, doing business as Jacobs. Who's
Right.
handling that?
So in 2017 and 2018, the Board of Aldermen approved an ordinance and a resolution for the agreement with Navigate Building Solutions and Jacobs Engineering. And part of that agreement, we authorized Phase 1 at the time, and we were going to wait until the city obtained the CLOMAR before we authorized Phase 2. So this is a authorization, a request to proceed for Phase 2, Brentwood bound contracts with consultants Navigate and Jacobs Engineering.
Thank you. Just
So,
informational.
Informational, no motion is
Okay.
required on this one.
Next on the, any questions for City Administrator on that? Yes.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor. Some of the designs that were circulated as possibilities for add-ons to Brentwood Bound were very attractive designs, but they were not authorized. Can those be taken off the table so they are not circulated and the design firms only produce the design, only show to the public the designs that have been approved or that have, for which the funding has been approved?
So later on, I believe it's under consent. There are 2 items where we are asking authorization so that the designs that are actually produced reflect what will be built. So it will correct what you just asked for, but at a later
At a
date.
later date, thank you.
Anything else? All right. Item 8C, we have a presentation from MSD on the stormwater capital funding.
Right, this is Rebecca Losley.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Rebecca Losley, and I'm the Program Manager for the Program Planning Division at St. Louis MSD. And I'm here tonight. This is going to be really exciting. We're going to talk about stormwater. I know you guys have talked a lot about Brentwood Bound. We've already been talking about stormwater quite a bit, but we're going to talk a little bit more. And I'll try to make it as exciting as I can for 8 o'clock at night. So a quick agenda. We're going to talk a little bit. MSD is 2 utilities in 1. A lot of folks know we're a wastewater utility, but we're also a stormwater utility. And so I wanted to bring that to the forefront as we begin to talk a little bit about the OMCI taxing districts. I'm going to talk quickly, because I know you've got a lot on your agenda, about the history of stormwater services at MSD. I'm going to talk about a plan moving forward and looking at a couple of potential revenue and funding options. I'm going to give you an idea of a timeline, and I'm completely going to open it up for questions at the end. So, history of stormwater services at MSD. Prior to 2016, there were sub-districts in which MSD taxed in order to provide operation and maintenance and capital improvements. So you probably have heard the term OMCI. That's what it stands for, operation, maintenance, and capital improvements. So see the red boundary areas shown on the map and on the presentation. Those are our OMCI taxing districts. So prior to 2016, we used those taxing districts to fund capital projects within this area for Deer Creek, for the city of Brentwood. But because of the way we were set up, there were some areas that had no funding for these types of services. So the areas that were in the gray, especially out west, did not have an ability to have operation and maintenance of stormwater, the utility. So because of that, in 2016, MSD put forward a Proposition S. It was passed by voters, and what it did is standardize funding for MSD to operate and maintain our storm sewer system. At the time that was passed, the Board of Trustees set the OMCI taxing districts that I showed you in this previous slide to 0. And because of that, we did have some fund balances in those areas that we were able to continue to fund capital projects. There was about $70 million worth of stormwater projects that have been ongoing since 2016, some of which you may have experienced here in your town. But because they were turned to 0, we took a proposition earlier this year. We also called it Proposition S. It was rejected by the voters at a 47% margin, but the goal of Proposition S was to fund capital improvements. The Proposition S that passed in 2016 only handled operation and maintenance. The 2019 Proposition S was going to fund a $30 million a year capital program to address stormwater erosion and flooding problems. Unfortunately, it did not pass. If you're interested to see, I didn't include it in the PowerPoint slides, but I'd be happy to pass it around the table. I do have a map of the 2019 Prop S vote results, and you can see the city of Brentwood shown, and the Brentwood shading is showing that it was about a 59 to 62% in favor of Proposition S for a capital program back in 2000 earlier this year. But it didn't pass, but the reality is problems still exist. And right now, MSD does not have a way to fund solutions to those problems. So what kind of problems are we talking about? I think many of you know, having Deer Creek run right through the heart of Brentwood, we have localized flooding, we have erosion problems, and we have regional flooding problems. And so MSD has continued to have a lot of projects that have been identified that we are not able to fund. I believe that you should have in your packet, Bola was grateful to Bola to provide it to you, a list of all of the projects that are identified within the Deer Creek OMCI taxing district. It looks something like this. Brentwood, it's actually in alphabetical order by municipality, and Brentwood's first. So right now we have 3 projects that MSD has identified for capital improvements that we are not able to fund because there is no OMCI taxing district money or no taxing revenue based on a stormwater vote. So with that, MSD is faced with, in a few years, we may go back to the public for a vote on a stormwater capital improvement program. But in the meantime, we do have these taxing districts that could be used to address flooding and erosion. And a reestablishment of those taxing districts would require a recommendation by MSD staff and a positive vote by MSD Board of Trustees. So what I've been tasked and I'm responsible for is coordinating all the municipalities within the Deer Creek OMCI. So there are 21 municipalities, of which Brentwood is one, that we are meeting with, and I'll tell you, I spoke with Creve Coeur City Council last week, and I'm speaking with Webster Groves tomorrow night. So we are continuing to engage the representatives of the muni to understand your opinion of whether or not you feel that MSD should turn these back on or not. I want to give a shout out to Eric from Parks. He was, actually Brentwood hosted the meeting with all 21 municipalities, so thank you for that. And I really see MSD's role in this as a facilitator. We want to understand what your feelings are of whether or not you think this is something that's appropriate for your residents or not. So moving forward, we've got these meetings with each one of the individual municipalities, and then staff is going to submit a recommendation to MSD board. I'm going to be submitting a report to Brian Holscher, our executive director, and he would in turn submit something to our board as a recommendation of whether or not we see it as a favorable to turn them back on or not. So we're here to offer 2 options. Besides just yes or no, we're also going to offer you 2 options. And if you could find in your packet a sheet that looks like this. It's got the Deer Creek OMCI taxing district and all 21 municipalities listed. And the first option that we would be proposing is to fund the Deer Creek OMCI taxing district in the same way that MSD funded it in the past. And that would mean that the highest ranking projects would go first and move down. It would not be based on municipality. It would be strictly based on the highest, most high benefit projects would go first. MSD would design, plan, we would plan them, we would design them, we would construct them, and it would be based on available funding based on the taxing district. So using the 2018 revenues, assessed values for homes in the Deer Creek OMCI taxing district, this OMCI taxing district generates approximately $3.7 million a year. You can see Brentwood's residents generate about $242,000 of that $3.7 million. So that's just kind of give you an idea. One of the things that's come up a couple times that I did do a little research to figure out, if these were turned on, this would mean an additional property tax of $78 on average per year for a resident. So that's kind of one of those metrics I know folks are looking for. The second option, and the reason why this sheet's important, would be a funding administration split. What we're proposing is that 50% of the money stay with MSD to do the same program that we would have done in option one, only we've got half as much money to do it. Oh, am I off? I didn't even pay attention to that. But the other half would go to the municipalities. And what we're proposing is that MSD would hold that money until you're ready for it. And it could be used as you prescribe for addressing stormwater needs. And that can be dictated by your muni. We've had a lot of questions about this. What could it be used for? It could be used for a stormwater master plan. It could be used for cleaning under culverts. It could be used to put in additional inlets whenever you're building a roadway project. So MSD, even to the executive director, I've heard Brian Holscher say, we will be flexible with the way that the city decides that you want to utilize your money. So if you chose the 50-50 split, Brentwood's revenue generated based on 2018 assessed values is $121,000. So that's what we would be talking about with the 50-50 split. We would be open to allowing a muni to bank that money, so that if you wanted to wait until you had $300,000 to fund a project that was important to you to address stormwater issues, we'd be willing to allow that. That's about it. The timeline. We've got meetings that have gone on early July. We're looking to wrap this up as far as getting recommendations by the end of September. We are meeting again with the entire Deer Creek OMCI municipality group here at your Brentwood Community Center on September 18th. And it would be my goal that at that meeting or very soon after, we could have a good understanding of what's the consensus of the municipalities. And with that, we're going to end up taking it to our board for recommendation on whether or not we should turn these back on or not. I'm open for questions if you've got any.
Alderman Lockmiller.
On that 50-50 split option, we've got big issues with sump pump runoff and off private property on the sidewalks freezing over the wintertime. Would we be able to utilize those funds for correcting those issues?
Yes. You would be, that was one question that came up earlier, was utilizing it for private drainage. If that's what the city of Brentwood would be interested in utilizing your funding for, we would support that.
Alderman Tice.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
is this sort of everyone would do the 50% kind of a situation?
That's right. All the cities within Deer Creek, it's an all or nothing. It's a yes, turn it on, or no, don't. And then it's a option one or option two. The other 11 OMCI taxing districts, we're doing the same process for Coldwater, Maline, Watkins, the other OMCI taxing districts. They can make their own decisions separate from Deer, but for Deer, it's got to be the same.
Alderman O'Neill.
I'm a little perplexed because our voters just agreed to tax themselves for Brentwood bound for Deer Creek flooding issues. If we come back and say we'd like to see MSD funding for problems, I'm not sure they're going to be terribly happy to revisit this, since none of these other municipalities are helping us with the Brentwood bound flooding issues. Can this go forward without Brentwood's participation?
It could. I mean, I think if Brentwood put out a really strong opposition, I think it could give pause of whether or not this is the right choice or not. But it would, what Brian Holscher has continued to say is this will be a consensus among the municipalities, which could mean that Brentwood could oppose and every other muni could say yes, and it may go. It's hard to predict how it's all going to fall out. I will say I've gotten a lot of strong support for this, but I can understand what you're saying in that you did just recently go forward with the Brentwood Bound program. There are a few other, let me pull it out. There are a few other stormwater projects identified in Deer Creek, and this list is fluid. This list is what MSD has on the books for stormwater projects right now. And if there's another project that we should add because there's a need that was never brought to MSD's attention, then certainly that would actually come to my department to identify a conceptual project, send a planning engineer out to take a look, and then we would add it to our program. So this is not the all-encompassing list of capital projects the OMCI district could fix. So I would say that I understand completely that sentiment. But on the other hand, it could fund things that aren't right along Deer Creek that still could be a stormwater problem for the residents.
Alderman Weggie.
So I see there's, on the list of projects, there's 33 million for buyout of flood property in Brentwood. Have you guys bounced that off our freshly minted Clomer to see which one are not going to be flooded anymore?
Well, and are you talking about the Hanley Industrial Court?
Yep.
That was one that actually Bola and I had kind of pointed out previously that potentially this may not be a project that the city wants to move forward with, would be a big buyout of Hanley Industrial Court.
Right, they might not flood anymore.
Certainly, I will tell you, it's right now, the price tag sitting on MSD's books is $33 million. It would take us 10 years of OMCI taxes in order to be able to even fund something like that. So we put those regional projects on this list, but certainly we have to balance the highest ranking project with the ability to be able to afford something, and that one was really considerable. And so that would be one that we would sit down with Bola and others at the city to make sure that this is something you're really interested in seeing us do, and fine-tune it to fit your needs.
Any other questions for Rebecca? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mayor Dimmitt, as next steps, perhaps the board over the next several weeks could give some thought to the direction. Obviously, Rebecca says that the board does not need to have a formal resolution or an ordinance. However, there needs to be a manner in which the decision of the board is communicated to MSD. So we're looking for direction, and maybe that can be in a form of a email exchange leading to the September 3rd meeting. But in the interim, some of the cities that are looking at option 2 and have started developing a resolution will share that template with everybody else, so that if other cities want to adopt that resolution, they have the opportunity to do so. So the plan right now would be to place a similar resolution on the September 3rd agenda unless we hear otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is item 8. Thank you. 8D, emergency request for additional funds for the purchase of police vehicles. Major McIntyre, you going to speak to this?
Mr. Mayor, members of the Board of Aldermen, I don't know how much of the packet that you have read, so I don't want to be redundant, so I kind of just skip to the highlights. We're down to 6 marked patrol cars at this point. In reality, we're down to 5. One is down at the garage. I was speaking with the mechanic today who told me it will be ready Wednesday. That's our newest patrol car. It has 106,000 miles on it. It's a 2016. It needed an entire new front rack and pinion and a lot of things that I worked at a gas station a long time ago, but other than shocks, struts, brakes, rack and pinion, 2 new tires, I'm not exactly sure after that what it needed, but it was a lot. We just received car 35. It's a 2015 Ford Taurus. We just got that back from the dealer. It was there for a week and a half. It's $2,200 for what they call a PTU. That's a power takeoff unit. I've gotten a pretty good education in our fleet. All of our vehicles are all-wheel drive, so the Tauruses and the SUVs are all all-wheel drive. But it should be noted that Ford no longer makes the Ford Taurus. They offer 3 vehicles for police service. The Ford SUV, what we commonly refer to as the Explorer, but they call it the PIU, Police Interceptor Utility, the Ford F-150, and the Ford Expedition. What we're looking for at this point, with the 6 vehicles we have, the lowest mileage vehicle that we have has 65,000 miles on it. The concern now is we've hired 3 new officers. With our CLIA accreditation, they're required to be in field training for 3 months. That means that there's 2 officers in the same car for 3 months. We only have 2 SUVs, and we have 3 officers in field training, which means 2 of them are riding in a sedan. The passenger compartments are pretty tight. And it's difficult at best to put one officer and the gear in there. Having two officers with two sets of gear is difficult. Essentially, what we're looking at is the fleet is very stressed. At one point, we were authorized for 9 marked vehicles. That dropped to 8, and now we're down to 6. And as I said, the concern is that the safety for the officers responding. In the memo, there was an incident that occurred. Perhaps you could recall Officer Langsdorff was shot and killed in the line of duty. 2 of our officers responded in an officer needed aid. Only one of the officers made it to the scene. The other officer, the vehicle he was driving, one of our SUVs, suffered a catastrophic transmission failure and had to be towed from the scene. At this point, it's almost robbing Peter to pay Paul with the vehicles. So we're really hoping. We have 2 that we ordered in February. Unfortunately, Ford changed the body style. The entire vehicle was changed in April. They shut the factory down, retooled for the 2020. We have been in contact with our Ford dealer probably 10 times in the last 2 months to say, when are our vehicles going to be here? We started in June. Now we're hoping for mid-September for delivery date. However, he has one on the lot right now that meets our specifications, but we do not have the authority to purchase that vehicle. So in essence, what we're looking for is the extra funds to fund the 2 that we ordered and this additional one that is actually sitting on the lot right now, which we could put into service within 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, so you need a budget amendment of the amount of $24,000 to fund the 2 additional, plus we're taking something out of the seizure? Okay, so what is it specifically? So what we need from this board is a motion to make that budget amendment for the 3 vehicle. Alderman Weggie? Okay, we've had the motion
So
by.
move with the numbers that you just said.
Okay.
Wait a minute, what are the numbers? Can we go through them at least?
24,000 minus
Well, I think Bo is working on that. We've got 24,000 for.
24,000 for the 2 cars, and that will be from the asset forfeiture and the capital improvement fund. And the additional vehicle, the cost of that is 34 plus 4,000, so it's approximately 37.5. Correct? Yes.
So you're asking, so can I just get it clarified then? So we're asking to move $24,000 from the asset forfeiture fund into the budget line for the police department, and then adding to that by another $37,500.
Right.
And that 37.5 is coming out of the fund balance? Where's the 37.5 coming from?
So there is a fund balance of about 35. Let's grab my budget book real quick.
Karen Shaw, would you care to come in and help us out?
Paul is right. There's 35,000 roughly fund balance in that asset forfeiture fund.
Okay.
And then the balance, there's an account in capital improvements, 6215, and it's for repairs and maintenance. And each department has an amount broken out that makes up that grand total of 141,000. We've checked. I think they had 39,000 budgeted. They haven't quite spent that, although I've already heard that the car he just was talking about that they're getting Wednesday's $2,000 repair. But they will have enough left over from that to fund that budget amendment.
Okay. Okay.
I second the motion.
I'm still really
Okay,
confused.
hang on a second,
I
just
can explain
procedurally. So we've got the motion by Alderman Weggie to make that.
There you go.
And we have a second by Alderwoman O'Neill. Now Alderman Plufka.
Okay, so $24,000 is being moved from a $35,000 asset forfeiture fund to cover at least a part of this 3-vehicle purchase? No.
Actually, the 24,000 will come from their capital that they didn't spend in repairs for their budget amendment. And then a little additional more will come from capital because they only have 35,000 in their fund balance for asset forfeiture. And the car's 37.5.
So how much will be,
I can explain.
What will
this.
be the end balance of the asset forfeiture fund?
Zero.
Zero.
So you'll be taking $35,000 out of the remaining $35,000 out of that asset forfeiture
Right.
fund and putting it towards the purchase of
Yes.
these 3 vehicles?
Yes, there is specifically $35,456 in asset forfeiture fund balance. So we will transfer all of that to the capital improvement fund to fund the 2 vehicles, because right now in the budget, there's 50,000 budgeted, and there is need for 30,
24.
how much? 37?
24.
24,000
additional,
to complete that purchase. Then we,
To complete the purchase of the 2
of
vehicles?
the 2 vehicles.
Okay.
Then we're buying 1 additional vehicle. So the difference between the 24 and the 35 in there, plus the balance from capital, will fund the 3rd vehicle. I can't do that calculation.
So the only fund balance being touched
Is the asset
is the
forfeiture.
asset forfeiture. It is not,
That's being zeroed out.
It's being zeroed
well,
out.
if we get more asset forfeiture money this year or next year,
No,
whatever.
I'm just asking. It's
Right.
being
Yes.
being
That will
zeroed out
zero it
as
out.
of this transaction.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And so the 10,000 or so, the $10,400 will be combined with the remaining money in the capital fund?
Right, from the line item that Karen mentioned.
Right.
Okay.
Cover the cost of the 3rd vehicle.
Okay, so the 3 vehicles will cost roughly $100,000. Is that pretty accurate?
112.
112?
Roughly,
Okay.
yes.
And we have budgeted 50,000.
That is
Right.
correct.
So the remaining 62, am I doing the math right? $62,000 comes from a combination of the asset forfeiture fund in the amount of $35,000 and the balance of that $65,000, or I guess the remaining $30,000 comes from the line from the capital fund.
Yes, that's correct.
All of that is, okay, all right.
They had 39,000 in that line item for their
Right.
repairs, and they haven't spent that.
Okay, and that's going to be moved in the amount of approximately $30,000 to cover the 112 total to make this purchase. Okay, I think I understand.
Okay,
Thank you.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes, Your Honor. Madam City Administrator, point of clarification. So at the last Public Safety Committee meeting, we were admonished that there would be no more funds coming from the police asset forfeiture. That's done. So this is the end.
As far as we know it right now. However, before we pulled ourselves out of that program, there were cases that we worked on. So as those cases are settled, there is the potential for revenue to come into that fund, but it won't be as much as it was before when we were actively in the program.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Alderwoman Tice?
So I just have a budgeting question. How did we miss budget by 50% the cost of each car?
Good question.
Good question. What I think happened was we were counting on, there were 2 vehicles wrecked, and right at the same round of budget time, we were counting on that money coming in 19 to cover that difference. And the budget got approved, but that money came in at the very end of 18. And you can't budget that whenever your budget's already done. But that's what I think was the timing of it at the end of last year when we were working on the budget.
Anything else? Okay, I guess we need roll call on this. Okay, roll call, Shelley.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
And Alderman Weggie?
Yes.
Passes.
Motion passes. Okay, thank you, Shelley. Next on the agenda is item 9, the consent agenda. By my counting, we have 16 items on this agenda. And I will just remind the board that the reason that the prior administration under Chris Thorne, the prior mayor, decided to start utilizing the consent agenda was primarily for things that are either ministerial or things that have been fully vetted through one of our 4 committees. So what you have in front of you in the consent agenda, and what has been the case most of the time, if not always, are items, again, that are simply ministerial, like the issuance of a liquor license, or things that came out of a committee with either unanimous or near unanimous approval. In essence, these are things that staff has identified and have concluded that all 8 of you would consent to passing these things. Now, occasionally there are going to come times when you look at these things and there's going to be some questions. What I hope that you do when you do have questions, that you reach out to staff to try and get answers to those questions. But if, after having completed your due diligence, if you still have questions, or if you feel like you just have a fundamental problem with one of these items being, passing one of these items, then we certainly can't consent to it. So with that introduction, I would entertain any motion or request. First of all, if you have any questions about any of the 16 items, let's take up those first. And then if you, after those questions, if you still want to have one of these or more items removed from the consent agenda, we'll take that up. So first, are there any questions about any of the items on the consent agenda? Alderman Weggie.
Yeah, can I just like a couple quick questions about the STL TV, one, the audiovisual contract? So that is a government entity that bid on that contract. So there are no issues with, mixing a private business bidding against a government entity and awarding that contract to a government entity?
I think I would view it much as an intergovernmental cooperation agreement, much the way we share service for IT services with the city of Clayton and other intergovernmental agreements.
Yeah, I mean, so that's kind of my question, because that's how we would award it, right? Right now, it's being awarded to a company called STL TV, not the city of St. Louis, through an intergovernmental
It's a
agreement.
division of the city of St. Louis, according to the paperwork that I reviewed.
So but it's not going to be an intergovernmental agreement. It's going to be a purchase order to a company.
Just a service agreement. That's
Okay.
correct.
And then are they providing just the audiovisual, or are they going to be doing the Skype setup and all the other, the
all of that.
YouTube loading and
All of that.
everything? So
Yes.
all basic IT and audiovisual to support these meetings will be on them. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about any of the items on the consent agenda? Alderwoman Tice.
So I have a question on the letter O with the culvert. Dan, there's an item, I mean, I don't want to get into a contract, but there's an item for like $6,500 for traffic diversion, and everybody who goes around it right now is sort of just able to divert on their own. Do you know what the $6,500 for traffic control is actually for?
Yes, the traffic control that we have out there is just temporary. The traffic control that the contractors propose should be much larger barricades, like a type 3 or even a concrete jersey barrier, because when they do the demolition, they're going to want to close it from curb to curb, like right there at Brentwood, and just on the other side of the box, closer to the entrance into the clubhouse. So it'll be closed for several weeks while they tear it out, pour it, let it cure, do a 7-day break test on the concrete, and then put the concrete back and then an asphalt cap. So these are things that we don't even have in our possession.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Are we all good on this, or does anybody want something removed from the consent agenda? Alderman Kramer.
Yes, Your Honor. Item number 9N, which is Resolution 1172, have some fundamental issues with that particular item, and would like to request your permission to remove that from the consent agenda.
Okay, we'll go ahead and remove that. Any other items from the consent agenda? Seeing none, then have we had a motion yet to pass this? No, can we take a motion to pass the consent agenda without item 9N?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Okay, roll call, please, Shelley.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderman Plupka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice,
Yes.
and Alderman Weggie.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda, we'll take up, I guess, we'll put that under new business?
Yes.
Okay. So that will be item 11H, I guess. Yes. Folks, we have 8 items under new business. All right, old business, we have none, so let's move into 11, new business. First up is Bill number 62.02.2. First reading by title only, please.
Checking whether the dot two is to be amended tonight or if it was a prior read as dot two.
Okay.
Oh, okay. It's Bill number 6202.2, first reading, an ordinance authorizing a first supplemental agreement, cost-sharing agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission and the City of Kirkwood for Manchester Road improvements.
Okay. Who's handling this?
You want to do it, or I can?
Hi, so Craig Schiller with Navigate Building Solutions again. So we've talked a lot about the MoDOT cost share grant, and the city approved this agreement about a year ago, August 20th of 19. Now that the city was awarded the East-West Gateway Grant of $1.2 million last fall for the Manchester Road improvements, and since MoDOT is actually handling all the design and construction of Manchester Road improvements, they have agreed to amend the agreement that's already between the city and MoDOT to include the East-West Gateway funds that will come through them during construction. So this is a great win for the city again, because it helps confirm another $1.2 million. And also with federal grants, there is a lot of paperwork and oversight that goes with that. So by MoDOT taking control of that, they're also going to take care of all that paperwork that's a requirement to get those federal funds reimbursed. To allow those funds not to have to go through the city, they'll go through MoDOT, and then the contributions from the city to MoDOT will just be less by that $1.2 million. So overall, this is another big win for the city, and MoDOT's being a great partner to take control of this to minimize the city's resource impacts.
Any questions? Alderman Plufka.
Craig, has the impact of this been reflected in the $79 million?
No, sir.
When will it? I mean, when it actually comes to pass, or what? I mean, at what point will? I mean, I'm assuming that when we first did the budgeting for this was not anticipated.
Correct. So as I mentioned earlier, the MoDOT cost share, the STP grant, which is this piece, and if the Great Ridge Greenway pledge comes to fruition by this year, all of that's above and beyond the $79.6 million. So it's not reflected in $79.6 million, but it's over on top of that, and the city can utilize those funds as they deem as necessary.
Okay. And with regard to the fact of how the money has been acquired by the city, are we constrained to use that money, whether it's reflected in the first CUP or this most recent CUP that's going to be tied to the economic development sales tax? Are we restricted in how we can use that money? If we see a savings, does it have to be for economic redevelopment?
So it was in regards to the COPS?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I could let Kevin probably talk to that, or Mark Grimm, but it's my understanding that those funds have to be used for economic development within the city, and I think it's pretty broad, but we've been allocating it strictly to Brentwood bound.
Okay, so for instance, if we were to realize, as a result of these potential agreements, savings in the cost of doing all the things that we currently have planned to do in terms of the streetscape and the connection to the GRG, and then also the floodwater abatement along Deer Creek, that this money that we realize could be redirected to do some of the things that we talked about in our workshop earlier, having to do with event lawns and dog parks and other things like that.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, and the city's going to do a community engagement effort to determine what the citizens and what you all want to do with that. And as you bring up, I mean, the city doesn't have the funds to do all those, like we've learned. But, you know, if the city gets all this, it's $8 million. It does do several of them. So
Right.
getting citizen input and learning the priorities of what, you know, let's do these three first will help make sure that the city spends those funds for what the citizens want.
You guys are going to continue to save us money on this too. I can just feel it already. So
The momentum is there,
Thank you, Mr.
and we're not stopping just because you all voted the cops. Bull and I meet several times a week. We're always looking for different foundations and government agencies. MSD is one of those that we're trying to work with. So to your point, we're not going to stop at 8 million.
Good to know. Thank you. Alderman Lockmuller.
But if this is an STP, doesn't it have to go to the transportation element of all this?
It does. Each grant has requirements on where the money goes. Even Gray Ridge Greenway Pledge, the money has to go to certain aspects of the project for the board to approve it. But to Alderman Plufka's point, that means that 79.6 million that was being spent on that can be utilized for other parts of the project.
Right.
But you're absolutely right that these funds have to go to certain elements to get that approval in place.
Anyone else? Alderwoman Tice?
So, Craig, I have a question about the two documents. There are two documents that say MoDOT cost share grants. So the second one is the original 3.8 that, from what I understood, had originally been coming. And then is this where you added the 1.2, sort of the east-west gateway? 1.2?
Yes.
Okay. So then so can you explain then the other slide you have that net benefit to Brentwood of 3.5 originally and 4.3 today? What are the differences in these two slides, and what, I sort of understand the second one, but not the
Yeah,
first.
I only have one slide. Did you include
So-
last year's slide?
The other slide was what we presented several months ago. So the most current one is dated 8/2018.
Oh, yeah, they're not
And
dates.
cost share
What's
to date, there's the column. Do you?
It doesn't have it looks like it doesn't have a date on it.
So,
There's the third column says delta of,
Oh.
yeah, that's the,
is that an old one?
That's last year's slide. I'm sorry for the confusion. I would just look for the one that includes the east-west gateway.
That one's the one that makes sense, so thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, can we get second reading by title only of bill number 6202.2, please?
6202.2, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance authorizing a first supplemental agreement, cost-sharing agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission and the City of Kirkwood for Manchester Road improvements.
Chair would entertain a motion to perfect 6202.2 into ordinance form.
So moved.
second.
All right, we have a motion by Alderman Lockmuller and seconded by Alderwoman Sims.
Alderwoman Sims.
I couldn't tell. Your voices sound the same. All right, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Leahy. Sorry, can I hear? Alderman Lockmiller,
Here.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Just a lot more.
Got me thrown off.
Alderman Tice.
Yes.
Alderman Tice,
It's a long night.
Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
and Alderman Weggie.
Yes.
Ordinance number 4886.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is bill number 6245. Can we get the first read by title only, please?
Bill number 6245, first reading, an ordinance designating a certain tract of land in the city of Brentwood, Missouri as a blighted area pursuant to Chapter 353 Revised Statutes of Missouri, approving the development plan submitted for the redevelopment of that blighted area, approving a development agreement in connection therewith, authorizing certain actions in connection therewith, and containing a severability clause.
Thank you. All right, we have already had the presentations on this matter, so I would open questions up to the board. Alderman Plufka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So regarding the presentation that was done during the public hearing section, I do have a question, and maybe you can answer. So as I understand it, we're talking about a $26 million outlay by the group to make this hotel a reality, and that they're going to realize in present dollars a savings by virtue of this abatement of approximately $1 million, about $1.6 million over 10 years, and then a little bit more. But the present value of that is about $1 million. So my question is this, and how can a 4% difference in the actual dollars that are being outlaid, in other words, a real cost savings of $1 million, translate to a 21% increase in the internal rate of return? You quoted us as a 12.3 internal rate of return without the abatement and said that that jumped to 15.5 by virtue of them saving $1 million in present value dollars. How is that possible?
It's possible because the tax abatement is a dollar for dollar reduction in their costs going forward. So net present value dollars is $1 million, but that savings is taken on an annual basis because it's taxes they don't have to pay, which increases their net operating income, which increases their internal rate of return.
And it has that exponential effect over the period of time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Weggie.
Yeah, Andy, so you reached the conclusion that this was a blighted property, but I didn't understand what the economic or the social liability of the Brentwood was.
Okay.
Can you explain what that is, other than the missed opportunity of a new business going in?
Sure. So as the property sits currently, the economic liability arises from the fact that the property, with the exception of 2019, which the property jumped up in value, the property hasn't increased in value over the prior 8 years before then. And its increase in value also has not kept pace with increase in value citywide. I think citywide, Brentwood's seen property increases of roughly 45%. This property's increased 30-something percent. So it's not keeping pace, which means it's a drag on the city. It's not producing any other tax revenue right now. It's not housing jobs or anything either. The social liability arises from the fact that it's a vacant property. It's unsecured. It's an attractor for vandals, vagrants, homeless people to camp on. There are a lot of empty liquor bottles found around the site. Looks like people have been piling those up for a while. So people are hanging out doing stuff on the property. Also, a lot of dead animal carcasses in the building. So it's just, as the building is deteriorating and vacant, it's attracting a lot of kind of social liability factors like that, like dead animals and other vagrancy and vandalism.
But from an economic liability, it's not costing the city money right now. You're saying it's not it's not appreciating at the same rate as other properties within Brentwood, but it's not costing Brentwood money.
It does not appear to be directly.
And
No.
it is generating revenue from property taxes right now.
Yes.
And it does share a parking lot with an active building, correct?
Correct.
And so we're still seeing people camping and living in this building despite the fact that there's a company that shares the same property with them?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You mentioned also that there was no frontage, and that was one of the reasons you said that it was obsolete.
Yes.
So the plan that has been presented, and I know we're going to talk about that in the future, also does not have any frontage. There is an entrance that is brought on, but that's the same as the easement that they're currently using, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
So does that mean the new building would also be considered obsolete under that definition of no frontage?
It would, yes.
Okay. I have a question for Bola. So PGAV was representing Brentwood in this case, right? And I believe we approved it in December of last year. We are being reimbursed from Equus for this activity, correct?
Absolutely, 100%.
No questions at this time. I'll see you on the CID one.
Thank you. Alderman Alderman O'Neill, you raised your hand first.
Well, all right. You have presented benefits for Brentwood for this, but there also have to be some negatives where it's going to, once a hotel is built, it's going to take increased scrutiny from police. I've heard nothing about police having to go to take vagrants out of a building. So there have to be some negatives. Is there something that I'm missing in any of these tables that show what the costs will be for Brentwood to take care of this building once it's built?
We haven't produced that analysis. The statute doesn't require it. It requires the fiscal impact, which is a pretty straight ahead comparison of tax revenues with the tax abatement program and without. We haven't had any conversations with the police or fire department about any increased costs associated with any increase in calls for a hotel.
The reason for that is that the statutory analysis is the question of whether to abate the tax, not the use of the property as such. So that the fiscal analysis is abatement, no abatement, in terms of revenue production. not service demand. Does that make sense?
It does, except there are service costs involved
and
that seem
if I
like they
may,
should be
if the mayor-
reflected somewhere.
Yes. So Lisa can speak to that because the property will be paying some revenue to the city, and Lisa can outline those. So that would pay for the additional service cost that the city would provide to that property.
So I guess the way to look at this as well, though, is that all of our businesses in Brentwood pay an annual business license. There's different types of categories. Hotels are placed in a gross receipts category. So although I can't tell you an exact figure, we have other hotels in Brentwood, and without divulging all the numbers, they pay about $7,000 annually for a business license, which that to some respect pays for services and so forth that might be rendered throughout the year, so.
Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Lockmuller.
Andy, I got a question for you. On the tax abatement, property tax abatement.
Yes.
Is that both land and improvements when we get to that percentage, or is it just on the improvements?
It's 50% on the improvements. The land value stays the same.
And then I thought there was some mention of maybe some abatements of the pilots.
We hadn't factored in any pilots
Okay,
or anything.
thanks.
Alderwoman Tice.
Several of us met earlier today, and I just want to make sure clear on this, Andy. So if this goes through, the abated taxes in the first few years would be a little over 120,000.
Correct.
But the taxes that are paid for the first few years are about 124. Okay.
Yeah. and
So there is a income coming in even in those early
Correct,
years, even though
yes.
there's, okay.
Yeah, because it's not 100% abatement, it's a 50% abatement. Any other questions? Okay. We're just doing, okay. Great, thank you. So, C. Next on the agenda is item 11C, bill number 6246. Mr. City Attorney, can we get a first read by title only?
I'm sorry, Mayor, the link on the
No
page
worries.
is taking us to the wrong place. Bill number 6246, first reading. No, that's not an ordinance approving a petition to establish the South Hanley Road Community Improvement District, establishing the South Hanley Road Community Improvement District as a political subdivision of the state of Missouri, and directing the city clerk to notify the Missouri Department of Economic Development of the creation of the district.
Okay, thank you. Same format. We've already had presentations on this, so the chair would entertain questions. Alderman Weggie.
Yeah, this is for Andy again. So in your presentation, you had a net present value over 15 years at 2.8 million with the CID and the tax abatement combined. So if I extrapolate out from the 1 million equals 3.3% internal rate of return, then I roll that up and they're running at 21.26% IRR if we pass both of these. Am I interpreting that math correctly?
You could be. It depends.
Sorry to throw that at you.
No, it's okay. I guess it depends on how they would apply the revenues from the community improvement district.
Right.
If they would, because they could use them to lower the cost of their financing and gain some advantage that way, or they could use those revenues to do a bond issue up front and take out some equity or take out some bond financing that way. So it would certainly have a positive impact on their IRR, but it may be as much as you say, but I can't do that math in my head.
Okay, sorry, I had to do it on paper, but it just seems like all of that is going to start compounding, right? We had 1 million for the tax abatement. Now, there was another 1.8 million net present value that you calculated on top of that, right? So we're just going to be layering benefit on benefit of benefit. Okay, question for probably Bola or Lisa, maybe. Do we have any such localized CIDs in Brentwood right now? Which is the entire building with the tile shop and Ace Hardware, and the Hardee's, right? Arby's. So we don't have any that are a single business.
No.
There's nothing on the Drury, correct?
There's a TDD.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Alderman Lockmuller.
Andy, on a CID, are those audited by any outside, as they go on, any other, like a government agency or anything of that nature? Or are they pretty well just self-running?
They're self-running for the most part. I believe and I'll ask Mark Grimm to correct me if I'm wrong, but I know they are subject to annual review. Their budgets are subject to annual review by the city council, and they're also subject to audit by the state auditor in the state of Missouri.
That's correct. The only thing I would add is for TDDs and CIDs that do bond issues, there frequently is a requirement associated with the bond issue that an audit be obtained. So on Drury's, for instance, on that TDD, there's not an audit performed. There's no bond issues outstanding. It's just that they're collecting revenues on a pay-as-you-go basis.
And for either one of you, I guess, can a CID offer a bond? I guess you can either offer a bond to help pay like a down payment on the project, or you can just use it for revenue source
That's
annually.
right.
Okay.
That's right.
All right, and then that 1%, that's not determined by anybody but their board, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So, correct. I mean, the development agreement that is before the Board of Aldermen currently authorizes, and the petition authorizes a sales tax of up to 1% and a special assessment of up to $5 per room night.
Okay.
So the Board of Aldermen, pursuant to that development agreement, has the ability to negotiate and dictate those, come to an agreement on those items.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Andy or anyone else on bill number 6246? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Next on the agenda is item 11D, bill number 6252. Are we doing a first and second on that?
We would like to request that.
Okay. Mr. City Attorney, can we get a first reading on bill 6252, please?
Bill number 6252, first reading, an ordinance authorizing and approving the amendment of the City of Brentwood's current employee handbook, updating the employment classification, employee background check, fitness for duty testing, psychological evaluations, anniversary date, employees requiring medical attention, recorded phone lines, smoking policy, standards of conduct and corrective action, compensatory time, overtime pay, and emergency call-outs, shift differential pay, payroll and paydays, workers' compensation, uniforms and clothing allowance, benefits, vacation time, and compensatory time. I did not write that.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, are we going to have a presentation on this? or-
Jason Coates, HR manager.
Stopped after handbook.
Good evening. I had done a presentation for the Ways and Means Committee a couple of weeks back, and we kind of went through these line by line. I'd be more than happy to do that again if you wanted, if there was a specific item that
Well, seeing
caused
that
for
you've
concern.
Well, seeing that you've already done this with the Ways and Means Committee, why don't we open it up to questions for the board for Jason? There are no questions about this.
Well, that makes it easy.
All right. Can we get a second reading of bill number 6252 by title only, please?
Bill number 6252, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance authorizing and approving the amendment of the City of Brentwood's current employee handbook, updating the employment classification, employee background checks, fitness for duty testing, Psychological evaluations, anniversary date, employees requiring medical attention, recorded phone line, smoking policy, standards of conduct and corrective action, compensatory time, overtime pay, and emergency call-outs, shift differential pay, payrolls and paydays, workers' compensation, uniforms and clothing allowance, benefits, vacation time, and compensatory time.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to perfect 6252 into ordinance form.
Your Honor, I move to perfect Bill 6252 into ordinance form.
Second.
All right, we have a second by Alderwoman O'Neill. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
And Alderman Weggie? Sorry, Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Passes.
All right, thank you.
Thumbs what?
Next on the agenda, 11E, Bill number 6253. Mr. City Attorney,
887, right?
are we doing a first and second on this also, Bola?
Yes, please.
Okay. Can we get a first read on Bill number 6253, please?
Bill number 6253, first reading, an ordinance amending Chapter 110 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Brentwood, Missouri to establish a video conferencing meeting policy.
Okay, thank you.
We thought it was prudent for the city to formalize a policy governing remote attendance of absent board members and their participation in board meetings. If you recall, a number of the aldermen have Skyped in on meetings, and it has come to our notice that other municipalities have a formal policy that guide against how, provide a guideline on how you do the voting, how you take minutes, what you do during closed meeting, and primarily the alderman has to be able to see what is going on in this meeting room, and vice versa. You all have to see the alderman participating on the other end. So we ask for a first and second reading on this one as well.
Any questions for City Administrator on this? Alderman Plufka.
You meant to include audio and video, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, can we get a second read on Bill number 6253 by title only, please?
Bill number 6253, second reading and consideration for adoption, an ordinance amending Chapter 110 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Brentwood, Missouri to establish a video conference meeting policy.
All right, Chair would entertain a motion to perfect 6253, Bill number 6253 into ordinance form.
So moved as the highest Skyper on the board.
I'll second. I've done it a lot lately.
Okay, we have the motion by Alderman Weggie and seconded by Alderwoman Tice. Any further discussion? Alderman Plufka?
Thank you. Regarding subsection F, closed meetings, it strikes me by my read of it that it's different than how we've been sort of conducting ourselves to this point with closed meetings. I know the one time I Skyped in on the regular meeting, I was not able to participate in the closed meeting. Would this, am I reading this right? Would this allow for my attendance remotely to a closed meeting? Or a closed portion of the meeting, I guess?
And I'm sorry, what is your question? I'm just reviewing the text.
Yeah, so whether or not that subsection F would make it possible for anybody on the Board of Aldermen to attend remotely using the same qualifications that are spelled out in the other part of this ordinance, or this bill. Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. City Attorney, there is a provision in this language that seems to allow the pausing of the meeting if there was a technical glitch in the reception of that outside attending or alternately attending member. But it stops short of saying, let's say that glitch goes on for a while. Have other municipalities had a situation where a signal or system goes down for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes? And do we stop the meeting that long, or how does that work?
I'm not sure the provision you're looking at. It is
Okay.
if the remote member loses audio and video two-way connection, their participation in the meeting is suspended.
Okay, let's see here. I think it's,
I think that's what we tried to express, so if you,
I think it's under E. I could be wrong. There's the text of the memo, and then there's the text of the actual item.
Voting would stop.
That's exactly what Kevin
It just,
said.
yeah, it says if the voting was taking place, that the voting shall stop.
There you go.
Did that answer your questions, or?
Fails during the voting
I'm
process.
sorry, at the bottom of page 3, I see what you're talking about. It says that if in the process of voting, the absent member suddenly loses the two-way audio and video connection, then the voting shall stop until all components are restored and the video presence is again noted in the minutes, or the member's remote attendance is terminated or abandoned. So the board can determine that it will proceed.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? The chair would entertain a motion to perfect Bill 6253 into ordinance form. No, we already did that, didn't we? Alderman Weggie did that, I'm sorry. My bad. Okay, no further questions, then roll call, please.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Alderman Weggie?
Yes.
Passes. Ordinance, the bill becomes ordinance number 4888.
Thank you, Shelley. Item 11F, Bill number 6254.
Bill number 6254, first reading, an ordinance to update and implement the non-uniform City of Brentwood employees' 12-step salary schedule and providing for the effective date of this ordinance.
Who's presenting on that?
Eric.
Eric.
Good evening. For the sake of brevity, my memo and supporting documentation were attached in board docs, but basically we're making the recommendation to move the assistant program coordinator from range 3 to range 9 and the program coordinator from range 10 to range 14.
Any questions for Eric on that? Alderman Plufka.
Thank you. Eric, isn't there a process whereby our compensation program is updated on a, biannual basis?
It is, unfortunately, from time to time, and the last time, and Jason can speak to this a little bit more, the last time they didn't check every position, and when they checked the assistant program coordinator position, they didn't find any like comparables, so they couldn't compare the assistant program coordinator. Unfortunately, with the Parks and Recreation Department, or Parks and Recreation field, each department's a little bit different. So each job, I mean, every position, every facility, every job is a little bit different. So that means that each position, each job description is a little bit varied. So she had a tough time finding comparable job descriptions. That's why looking at the job requirements and not job requirements, I apologize. The education requirements and supervisory requirements is also equally important. And so that's why I did a cursory review myself, and that's what the data that's attached in board docs shows.
So the data attached reflects Higbee analysis or your analysis?
That is what I did.
Okay. When was the last update for non-uniform?
It was last year. And Jason, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's correct. It was last year for implementation at the January 1 of 19. We'll begin that process again next year for January 1 of 2021. This position was one that was one of the ones, as Eric had said, that we went out for. We typically send out anywhere from 18 to 20 positions of the approximate 55 that we have throughout the city. As Eric had indicated, when we sent this position out, because of the, and I hesitate to say it this way, but because of the vagueness of the job description that we had initially sent to them, they could not find comparables, as Eric had indicated. We refined the job description slightly better when we sent it back to Ms. Higbee, asked her to re-evaluate it. At that point, she made the determination that we were indeed undervaluing that particular position because of the level of responsibility that we accorded to those positions.
So it was sent back to Higbee in the aftermath of the departure of an employee.
Correct.
Okay. So when we do that biannual analysis and and see how consistent we are holding to our originally
75th percentile.
just, yeah, our original philosophy of 75th percentile. What we're getting in that updated analysis is not an updating of all the positions, but only a sampling of those positions?
Yes and no, and I don't mean to sound like a politician when I say that, but basically
That's
what
okay, you're
we,
talking to one.
what they do is they look at 20 specific positions. They would sample our neighboring communities for those specific 20 positions. They will revise the grid as a whole per all 20 of those, and then the positions that fall into the grids that may get adjusted up or down would also be reevaluated at the time we do our compensation on an annual basis. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Any further? Alderman Weggie.
So Jason, what is the consequence of waiting 4 months until we have Higbee come back and do this again? I mean, wouldn't we be able
Well,
to give her this feedback and this data
Bear
at
in
that
mind,
time?
when I say that, we will actually go out and have her do that next year. So it's actually would be for an implementation in 2021. So it's significantly longer than 4 months. It's not going to be implemented in January of this next year. It would be January of the following year.
But we would have Higbee coming in per our biannual schedule in the beginning of 2020 to redo the comparators
Right,
anyway.
sometime in 2020.
It would probably be
she will
around
do that.
May in
Yeah,
2020.
Closer to when we would almost start the budget process.
Right, so couldn't we give her this feedback then and just kind of roll it into one activity? It sounds like there's no impact.
She will,
of
there
doing
will
this
be
now.
an impact because we have a vacancy in the position and we're looking to go recruit to fill the position for one in
And we
particular.
did send this position out to Ms. Higbee, and again, by revising and kind of giving her a more refined job description, she was able to determine at that point that we were indeed undervaluing this position. Her recommendation was to move the assistant program coordinator from a step 3, grid 3 up to a grid 9.
So we couldn't just leave this position, the one that is now vacant, because then the incumbents in the other positions would be close in salary.
Right. You get into a compression issue
Right.
with that, and the
So
next
that's why
nearest
we're having to
position
make
is the
all these other
is the
subsequent
project
changes.
coordinator or program coordinator.
And also on top of that is the stress on the department is the fact that what's currently happening is we've lost a number of staff over the past 2 years, and primarily they're leaving to take lateral positions in other departments or have left the field altogether for more money, just to be frank. And so what happens is it puts stress on the department because we have to find new people to come in. It increases the workload. We're usually a 2 to 4 month vacancy, so that puts that stress on that other staff to pick up all that workload for those 4 months. And then to be completely honest, we haven't been finding the quality of candidates that we've been hoping for that we were earlier on. Now, we've been happy with our candidates, we train them up, and then we train them up for a year, and then they leave. So we were very happy to find Samantha. We trained her up for a year, she left. We brought in Joseph. We're very happy with Joseph. He came in for a year, he's left. So now we're back to square one, trying to find more candidates, training them up. If we wait another year, possibilities that they leave, and then we're back to square one again.
So how many have you had leads? You said some number
It's been 4 in the past 2 years
of the same position.
of the assistant and program coordinators. So 2 of each.
No further questions.
Okay. Any other questions? Can we get do you want to do first and second on this tonight? Ola, can you handle the second read?
I can.
All right, can we get a second read of Bill number 6254 by title only, please?
An ordinance to update and implement the non-uniform City of Brentwood employees' 12-step salary schedule and providing for the effective date of this ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Can get a motion to perfect 6254 into ordinance form.
So moved, Your Honor.
All right, we have a motion by Alderman Kramer.
Second.
And we have a second by Alderman Lockmuller. Okay, any further discussion on this? Alderman Plufka.
Thank you. I'm just uneasy with this process, and it's not so much the notion that this isn't the right thing to do eventually, and that I feel for the Parks Department and their dilemma and losing employees. But, I mean, I can think of other departments in this city who would like a chance to have us reassess midstream or mid-year or every year how closely we're adhering to our 75th policy, or 75th percentile philosophy, I should say. I was surprised to understand that the Higbee biannual review is a sampling rather than, or at least suggested that it's a sampling and it's not all comprehensive. I was under the impression, at least, that it was comprehensive. What I really object to about this is sort of the ad hoc nature of just, we've lost a couple of people, so let's immediately go ahead and reevaluate the position, raise the salary so that we stop this when we have a philosophy in place. I just think it sets a bad precedent. I don't, well, thank you.
Okay. Alderman Weggie.
Yeah, I share a lot of those same concerns. This seems reactive, and you know, I guess I would encourage staff when, you know, if this doesn't pass, that when Higbee comes through, maybe we can get a recommendation from her on if a move is. So I won't be voting in favor of this.
Anyone else care to speak to this? Okay. Roll call, please, Shelley.
Alderman Kramer,
No.
Alderman Lockmiller,
No.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice,
No.
Alderman Plufka,
No.
Alderwoman Sims,
No.
and Alderman Weggie.
No.
1 yea, 6 nay. Motion fails.
Thank you, Shelley. Okay, next on the item is 11G, Bill number 6133.2. Can we get first read of title only, please, Mr. City Attorney?
Bill number 6237.
I thought it was 613.
I'm sorry, 6254.
No, we've done that.
Nope.
I have down 6133.2.
My apologies. I was looking at the printed agenda.
No problem.
Bill number 6133.2, first reading an ordinance repealing ordinance 4783 and approving a site development plan and granting a conditional use permit for operation of a hotel to EQH Brentwood LLC for property numbered 1695 South Hanley Road.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Okay,
Thank
ladies and gentlemen, this is on the site plan. Do we have any questions from the board on this? Alderman Weggie.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Cannon, about the traffic? So when we originally saw this site plan, I believe there was another exit that was going to go through the Home Depot parking lot solely for the purpose of being able to take a left on the Hanley and have a traffic light controlled. And that's not really my question. I guess is the only way to take a left on Hanley with this new site plan is to take a left at a non-light controlled exit on the Hanley?
Yes, and for the record, Lee Cannon, CVB, working for the city as your traffic engineer. But yes, there is, to explain that a little further, there is no current cross-access easement from the Home Depot side, the Home Depot property. The city, I believe, was working with the developer in trying to get that to happen. It did not happen. So this is the existing Wheelan entrance is the only existing public road access to this property.
So wouldn't you anticipate in the morning when those 103 parking lots unload and try and take a left on the Hanley that there would be major traffic problems right there?
It will be difficult to make a left turn out of this development onto Hanley, yes. One of the mitigating factors that we recommended as a requirement, a recommendation for requirement, was that the entrance be widened to separate the left and the right turns out. That was shown on the latest site plan that I've seen. What that will do is that will allow the right turns to flow behind a stopped left turn up to a certain point, maybe 2 or 3 left turning cars out can be stacked before it impedes access to that right turn. But yes, it will take a while. Those levels of service, as we call them, are documented in the report.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Plufka, did I see your hand up? No?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Do you have any other questions for Lee or anyone? Lisa, on this matter? Site plan for the hotel?
No.
Yes, Alderman O'Neill.
I have a couple questions. Originally, there was the 5-foot buffer that was green space. I don't know who's handling this.
Lisa, right.
Lisa. All right, the 5-foot buffer is gone, so what is left is a 1-foot strip over which somebody can step to get their cars. The more I think about this as extended stay, I'm not sure it's all business travelers with an Uber instead of something. I'm thinking of university students who are moving in, or a parents' weekend where parents come for several days to visit. They're going to have a car. They're going to take their students somewhere out for dinner. They're going to go shopping. Those cars are going to go in and out, and with everybody there the same weekend, I'm envisioning traffic that will not only have a problem exiting, but may overrun that 1-foot barrier, and traffic will go to be parked in the parking lot that doesn't belong to the hotel. Has there been any way to mitigate that?
Well, the site is relatively tight, so I think really everything's been examined for different layouts. We did spend meetings looking at different layouts, different utility of this parcel, but this was ultimately probably the best solution. You were asking about just the 1-foot strip. Would you like more information, though, about parking and that they would overflow onto the adjacent?
Right.
I'm not happy with the situation. If somebody has something that's going to solve it, that would be great, but I don't know whose question that is.
As it's
it's sort of,
proposed right
it is
now,
what it is, I guess.
It would require an exception, which is permissible by the Board of Aldermen to review this under the UD zoning requirements.
Okay.
Alderwoman Tice. Oh, okay. Any other questions for anyone? Now's the time. Okay, folks, thank you very much. Next on the agenda is item 11H, Resolution 1172. This was taken off the consent agenda pursuant to the request of Alderman Kramer. With that, Alderman Kramer, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, sir. So this topic has gone through a pretty good amount of committee review, Mr. Chairman, but I had a conversation with our city administrator following up on some email traffic about this resolution, which seems to indicate in the abstract either we pave Swim Club Road or we take care of the 4 items that were on the list of concerns, a couple of which are very important. One of those is the north side of the Hanley Industrial Court by the Ice Cream Specialties. It's kind of a connecting route, a connector to Strassner that's heavily used by our commercial tax base, our shoppers, our visitors, our commuters, back and forth from the Metrolink, Deerbergs, the entire Deerberg Center, the promenade, There's a sidewalk there that connects across this particular street that's in need of repair. As you may recall, maybe some of the other board members who've been around the city for a long time, Hanley Industrial Court has evolved exponentially. Its name has not. For some reason, they continue to be content with calling it the Hanley Industrial Court, but its use has gone mixed use, and we've relied on it heavily for kind of a bookend to our commercial district that's very successful for our city. Hanley Industrial Court in the abstract and the roads that connect to it, as well as the Brentwood Lane, which is the second fundamental issue that goes along with my concern, is to be placed on hold as well. That's it's not a very big area, but it's outside of Brentwood Square. It's outside of one of our popular restaurants, and certainly not trying to be biased, but it's bordering on the entrance to Brentwood Forest. My concern is that if we push those, especially the Hanley Industrial Court item, off to next year, my concern is we've made no provisions either in printing, verbally, or any indications that I've been able to secure for having taken care of these items before now. And now, even temporarily, cold patching, maybe some sort of asphalt repair over the concrete. There's some gaping holes that exist right now, right in front of where those 18-wheelers come and go out of that Ice Cream Solutions. They're just sitting there. Traffic goes back and forth to the school system, the Brentwood Early Childhood Learning Center, and the other areas around there. That sitting there until next year just seems almost unacceptable, and I hope that the other board members will reconsider. The swim club lane, on the other hand, I drove it again here this evening just to be sure before this meeting. And Your Honor, I can't see that any safety concerns of any substantial note on that road for a quasi-private club that's a dead end. The last time we really talked about that street was when one of our famed residents and attorneys for the city, Don Beimdeck, came forward and gave us some opinions on the railroad right-of-way and whether the city had purview over the street, but primarily in that conversation was the pathways or the pathway that was bordering it. The way it seems a budget technicality more to me than anything else. The committee was forced to go either or. I'm pleading with the brain power that we have in front of us this evening to consider at the very least, if they really feel like they have to go with the Swim Club Road project, which is $55,000 in that neighborhood. Just hard to imagine that we're spending that when we've got Hanley Industrial Court just sitting there. There are parts of Hanley Industrial Court, I admit, Mr. Chairman, over by the Little Fishes Swim Club, maybe not quite so heavily traveled. We haven't got any traffic counts. I don't see any data about that. I suspect if you put a traffic count on Swim Club Road, you're going to come up with a very small amount of vehicles. It's a seasonal use at best right now. So you've got the Hanley Industrial Court item. I'd like to hear from our Director of Public Works just what that item would cost if we were to find a way to parse that out. The Brentwood Lane would be the second choice as an addition. The other items, there's an alleyway over by Park Ridge. I can't see that was deemed as a high priority. And the other items on that secondary list either. But Mr. Chairman, I guess I am, before we go forward with this resolution, I am requesting information from our Director of Public Works on the cost to try and at least add in the Hanley Industrial Court and perhaps revise or amend that resolution.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Kramer. And I probably put the cart before the horse. It may not even be necessary to hear from Dan. So can we first see if we even have a motion to approve this resolution, Resolution 1172?
Motion to approve Resolution 1172.
Okay. Second. We have a motion and a second. Okay, now with that, can we get, Dan, I don't know if you're in position to answer Alderman Kramer's questions
Regarding the Hanley Industrial Court area, which of those were you asking as far as the cost? We bid
it's
it out in
A1.
May, and we put the results before the Public Works Committee in June, as well as the Ways and Means the following month.
A, it's A1.
Hold on a second, Dan. I think, okay, which one are you wanting?
A1.
Yeah.
A1. Yes, sir. Do you, Mr. Chairman, may I ask a follow-up
Sure, go
question?
right
here? Dan, would you agree that in terms of overall priority, would you continue to place Swim Club Road above this project denoted under A1?
Problem with that is that
One second, Dan. Madam City Administrator, we had a conversation before tonight's meeting about the topic of budgets on this item. If we were to try to find money for such an item, where might that come from?
There, right now, I'm not aware of any savings within the capital improvement budget or capital improvement fund that we could use to pay for this. The only other option would be to not do a whole lot of things. And then that really depends on a conversation with each department to find out, and with Karen Shaw to find out how many of the items that were budgeted in the capital improvement fund we've commenced or we've completed. So absent of that, it's fund balance, and I believe that the narrative we've been taking to every committee is not really tap into fund balance at all until we issue the debt for the 2019 COP.
So that would be the item, is the fund balance would be the source.
That would be,
Okay.
yes, the only source right now.
So the items, the four of them were tabled by the committee based upon, I guess there was a budget amendment that was talked about, and that was,
well, we had 4 base bid streets, so the base bids came in again over budget. It was 122,414. So trying to stay within that constraint of roughly $61,000, we looked at what could you do with just $61,000. So you could maybe do a combination on some of the base bids or just maybe one base bid. But again, the direction of the committee was to focus more on Swim Club because of its condition from the prior year into 2019. You know, it deteriorated due to a lot more truck traffic than, you know, it normally gets.
and so I guess my question is, if Swim Club Road wasn't done, we'd need an extra, give or take, let's see, 70,000 to be able to do that part of Hanley Industrial Court. And that's if we did every slab that you've got noted here, which is quite a number.
Right, because we actually did in-house 2 slabs over on Strassner, like at 1336 Strassner, that area. Because we knew we couldn't push them any further. You know, you can't keep patching them. They were just too deteriorated. So Ice Cream Specialties, it's just so many slabs. You know, we don't have enough traffic control devices to do that. And it's in a bad area since you've got a T intersection there.
Yep.
And then it takes it all the way down to Metro Lighting and then kind of warps around closer to Deerberg's. You know, once it's improved, it'll be great. But right now, I think due to all the truck traffic that Ice Cream Specialties and other large trucks have put on that road, it's burdened the slabs and they're deteriorating.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Director Dan, I appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, I guess express my disappointment that we find ourselves under the current budgetary constraints. A budget amendment could potentially be possible. I don't know if that's effective to be debated tonight at this late hour. However, I guess it would be helpful to understand that I think that we can do better as a city. We found ourselves in this position of the condition of the streets inside Hanley Industrial Court, I think long before today. I think patching could have been done quite some time ago. And traffic measuring, the amount of cars that pass through this and trucks that pass through this area that provide revenue, income, and life. I guess I forget the name of the term, but the product of life or the quality of life that we enjoy is diminished by the fact that we travel through this area every day. I don't think I can say the same thing about Swim Club Road. So my hope is that, and I'll be against this resolution, my hope is that our Director of Public Works and our Streets Department will take it upon themselves to go through the entire Hanley Industrial Court, but especially these areas that are desperately in need. And next year we can work this into our budget and not find ourselves in the same position. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Kramer. Alderwoman O'Neill, you still?
I had a question for Dan again. We just got a notice that there will be road work done on Strassner near the Y, which will be a road closing, and they're digging up the middle of the road. What are the costs to the city of repairing that? Because can that, if we
This
were
is
going
an
to...
MSD project, I believe. So there would be zero cost to the city.
So if they are going to tear that up, if we were to work on the Strassner, Brentwood Boulevard to Urban, those two could be done possibly near the same time?
Well, I would venture to say that the repair to Strassner will be done before the end of this year. Therefore, our goal would be in a future budget, perhaps 2020, then we would be doing our repair to Strassner Drive between Brentwood Boulevard and Urban. I'm not sure exactly the location. Lisa, are you aware of where this repair will be along that stretch?
So just to be clear, so it is an MSD project, but it's an MSD project because they're repairing a sewer that goes, I mean, literally right down the center of Strassner. The project site would be on Strassner between Hanley Industrial Court and Urban Drive. So it doesn't go all the way out
So it's
to
further back.
Brentwood.
So if
It wouldn't be the same area.
But they would have to get a facilities permit. And so again, they will be held to what the current code requirements say in terms of replacing that street section. And so it's not, that will be on them to do, so.
But if that is a disruption already, and we were to opt for the overlay of Strassner nearby, we would have traffic disruption only once if we could finance that with our 2019 money.
The disruption from MSD project is projected to be 1 week. It's going to be weather related, but hopefully they'll get that project completed within 1 week's time.
So could we do could we mill in Overlay Strassner, Brentwood to Urban in 1 week, the same week or close to it?
If we had the funds.
Well, I'm saying instead of doing Swim Club Lane, opt for this instead. And we'd have one stretch that looked good and felt good.
Bless you.
My response doesn't change. Yeah.
Alderwoman Sims?
We belabored this issue at length at Ways and Means, and I was frankly against it at the offset. I thought it was unfair that, you know, Swim Club Lane, you know, we took them out of the line because they were doing construction, and then they wanted to go back in the line ahead of other streets, and then, you know, when we hadn't budgeted for 2019. But what was ultimately compelling to me was that the road is in bad condition, and it came forward that the other streets can handle the delay. You know, and in committee, we discussed that it would be likely that we could find it, those streets could wait, and we would, you know, deal with them in other budget years. So I mean, I will support it, but I was, you know, I was not for it, but that turned me around. And then I did drive down the street, and it is it's in disrepair, and, you know, it's a dead end for cars, but a lot of foot traffic, it sees a lot of other use, so my 2 cents.
Thank you. Anyone else care to speak to this? All right. Then I guess we have a motion to approve 1172. Can we please get a roll call?
Alderman Kramer?
No.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
No.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Alderman Weggie?
Yes.
5 yea, 2 nay, motion passes.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is item 12, citizens' comments. Anybody in the audience care to address the board? Now is your time to do so. Okay. Next up, we have a need to go into closed meeting. The chair would entertain a motion to go to a closed meeting pursuant to RSMO 610.021 and 2 for both legal and real estate. Can I get that motion? Got a motion by Alderwoman Sims. Get a second? Okay.
We all sound the same.
And
I'm sorry, I'm not.
can we add, Your Honor, can we add to that motion that we adjourn from it?
Sure. Any objection to
second
that,
it.
whoever made the motion? No, okay. All right. Get a roll call to go into closed session, please.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice? Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims? And Alderman Weggie?
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm told that this will not take very long, so if we can go straight back there without taking a break, you know, we might get.
Liar. Really?